This is happening right now, not a prediction, not a simulation, something that already happened. And what it reveals about what comes next should terrify every person living within 60 miles of Seattle. On July 8, 2025, at exactly 1:29 in the morning, Mount Rainier started shaking. And it did not stop. By the time scientists counted to 1,010 located earthquakes, they used a phrase nobody had ever used before about this mountain. Largest earthquake swarm ever recorded, ever, in the entire documented history of the volcano. By the time the swarm finally slowed, the count had climbed to 1,350 located earthquakes, with thousands more happening that were too small to locate, too small to find, but not too small to matter. Normal activity at Mount Rainier is 9 earthquakes per month. 9. On a single morning, it produced 40 earthquakes per hour. It's more than one every 90 seconds, 4 hours, while 150,000 people slept below it. Here is the detail that tells the real story. Inside Mount Rainier, right now, there is no solid rock where you think there is solid rock. There is clay. Wet, weak, unstable clay. Created over thousands of years by hot acidic water rising from deep inside the volcano and dissolving the mountain from the inside out. The same process that has been silently happening beneath the summit has generated every single catastrophic lahar this mountain has ever produced. The 1,350 earthquakes came from within that exact zone, 2.8 miles beneath the summit, right where the acid is, right where the clay is, and where the mountain is hollow. This is how it happened. July 8, 2025. The Pacific Northwest Seismic Network detected the swarm beginning at 1:29 a.m. Pacific Time. Within hours, the instruments were overwhelmed. 40 earthquakes per hour. Scientists at the USGS Cascades Volcano Observatory analyzed the data overnight. By morning, they had a statement. Alert level, normal. Color code, green. Probable cause, hydrothermal, fluid circulation, hot water moving through cracks, the mountain drinking itself. Here's what that means. When hot acidic water moves through rock, it does not pass through cleanly. It reacts. It converts hard volcanic andesite into soft clay minerals. Smectite, kaolinite. Clay that behaves structurally like wet putty. Clay that has no tensile strength. Clay that, when saturated and destabilized, does not crack or break, flows. The USGS has published peer-reviewed research mapping exactly where this clay sits inside Mount Rainier. Published in Nature. It's published in the Journal of Volcanology. Published by the Smithsonian. All of it saying the same thing. The upper west flank of Mount Rainier contains a massive zone of collapse-prone, hydrothermally altered rock, buried, invisible from the outside, but mapped, documented, confirmed, and the 1,350 earthquakes happened within it. Now here is what a lahar actually is. Because lahar is too soft a word. Scientists describe it as flowing concrete. They mean it literally. A lahar moves like water but carries the density of wet cement. Past lahars from Mount Rainier traveled at 45 to 50 miles per hour in the valley corridors. Up to 100 feet thick, where the valleys narrow. Carrying boulders the size of houses. Carrying entire forests. Bulldozing or burying every structure in its path. And Mount Rainier has 25 glaciers. More glacial ice than any other peak in the lower 48 states. Every cubic meter of that ice is fuel. When the mountain moves, the ice becomes water instantly, and the water picks up the clay, and the clay picks up the rock. And what moves down the river valley is not a flood. It is a wall. Here's the history that nobody mentions when they reassure you everything is fine. 5,600 years ago, a chunk of Mount Rainier's summit collapsed. The resulting lahar was so massive, it buried the landscape under 300 feet of mud. 300 feet. It reached Puget Sound. It removed the top 1,600 feet of the mountain in a single event. Where parts of Seattle's south side and Tacoma sit today, the ground beneath people's feet is the deposit from that collapse. They live on the evidence. Then, 500 years ago, it happened again. Smaller, but with no eruption, no magma movement, no precursor seismic swarm that researchers have ever found, no warning of any kind, the electron mud flow. It covered 13 square miles of the Puyallup Valley. Under up to 26 feet of volcanic mud, it buried an old-growth forest. The trees were still there when researchers dug into the deposits centuries later, preserved, entombed. The USGS calls an event like that a no-notice lahar. It is an official scientific term, no notice. It means the event can begin with zero precursory activity, no eruption, no gas spike, no ground deformation. It's just a mountain that has been dissolving itself for centuries and one day reaches its limit. Here's who lives below that limit. The city of Orting, 20 miles from the summit, population of roughly 10,000 people, built entirely within the lahar hazard zone. On the flat floor of the Puyallup River Valley, the flat floor is flat because it is made of lahar deposits. The city is built on the evidence of the last time, and a lahar from Mount Rainier could reach Orting in as little as 40 minutes after it begins. 40 minutes. That is not 40 minutes after a warning is issued. That is 40 minutes after the mountain moves. The warning comes after the movement is detected. The detection takes time. The sirens take time. The roads take time. The people take time. And in that math, there's very little room for error. Here's the infrastructure standing between 150,000 people and that math, a lahar warning system installed in 1998. Acoustic flow monitors buried in riverbeds. Sensors that detect ground vibration when a lahar is already moving past them. 42 sirens strung through the Puyallup Valley from Orting to the port of Tacoma. Tested every month at noon. It is a real system. It is operational. And federal funding for improving it dried up after 2001. Dried up. Stopped. For over 2 decades, the communities sitting below the most dangerous volcano in the United States have been managing that risk with a warning system that has received no significant federal investment since the year before the iPhone existed. And here's the detail that should make you stop. King County, it's a county that contains Seattle, also sits within Mount Rainier's lahar hazard zone. King County has no zoning restrictions for volcanic hazard. None. You can build a house in the lahar zone in King County today. You can build a school, a nursing home, a hospital, and people have, and businesses have. A 2015 USGS study documented over 90,000 people living in Mount Rainier's lahar hazard zones, along with more than 50,000 employees in approximately 3,800 businesses, thousands of students, hundreds of people in long-term residential care facilities, people who cannot run, people whose evacuation plan is being carried, all of them inside the hazard zone, all of them downstream of the hollow mountain. Now back to the swarm, because the swarm is over. And that is the part the headlines missed entirely. On August 25, 2025, the USGS declared activity at Mount Rainier had returned to normal levels. The alert level stayed green the entire time. Most news coverage treated that as reassurance. The swarm ended. Everything is fine. Move on. But here's what the USGS actually said in that August statement. They said the hydrothermal processes believed to have caused the swarm may be continuing at levels too small to generate detectable seismicity. May be continuing. Too small to detect? That is not the same as stopped. That is the same as invisible. The process that just shook the mountain 1,350 times in 6 weeks continues silently below the detection threshold. It's dissolving rock. It's enlarging cracks. Moving water through pathways in clay that was not clay before, and nobody can see it happening. Here is what the scientists who published research in Nature found when they used helicopter-borne electromagnetic sensors to map the inside of this mountain. They found that the collapse-prone altered rock on the upper west flank is mostly buried, not visible. It's not obvious. You cannot look at Mount Rainier and see the weakness. The mountain looks exactly the same from the outside, whether the clay inside has doubled or halved. It looks majestic, permanent, immovable, and inside it is dissolving. 3-dimensional slope stability models run by USGS researchers analyzed 29 million potential failure surfaces inside the volcano. 29 million. Their conclusion: the most collapse-prone zone on Earth at this volcano exists only on the upper west flank, the Sunset Amphitheater area. That is the zone that already collapsed 500 years ago without an eruption. And that zone still contains intensely altered, collapse-prone rock. The 5,600-year-ago collapse removed most of the altered rock from the summit and east flank, but it left the west flank. The Sunset Amphitheater, still there, still hollow, still dissolving. Now here is what an actual collapse scenario looks like in 2025. The west flank releases. A chunk of mountain larger than a cubic kilometer drops into the Puyallup drainage. USGS models show the lahar would reach residential areas inside the park in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Communities outside the park, 15 to 60 minutes. Otting, 40 minutes. Tacoma, eventually. Tacoma is 37 miles from the summit. The lahar fills the entire Puyallup River Valley floor. Depths modeled at up to 26 feet in the valley. Every bridge in the path fails. Every road in the valley is buried or swept away. The evacuation routes go with it. And the people who were supposed to drive out have nowhere to drive because the roads are gone. This is not speculation. These are published USGS models using the actual topography of the actual valley and the actual documented volume of altered rock on the actual west flank, published, available to read. Referenced by Pierce County Emergency Management. And the response plan in the most vulnerable communities includes pedestrian evacuation, walking, for people within the hazard zone who live where the traffic models show the roads will fail. The official plan is to walk away from a wall of concrete moving at 50 miles per hour in 40 minutes. Here is the comparison the USGS makes in its own official documents. Romero, Colombia. November 13th, 1985, the Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted. Lahars traveled down river valleys in the dark. They arrived at the town of Armero at night. Maps had been drawn. Warnings had been issued. Officials had been briefed. More than 20,000 people died because the warning did not become evacuation. Because people did not believe something that had never happened in their lifetimes was actually happening now, because they had lived in that valley for generations and trusted it. The USGS includes a photograph of Armero in its Mount Rainier hazard literature, not as a footnote, as a warning. It's the answer to the question. What happens when the plan doesn't work? Here's the broader picture nobody is connecting. Mount Rainier's glaciers have lost more than a third of their ice in the last century. Less ice means less weight pressing down on the volcano's slopes. When you remove weight from a slope, the rock beneath decompression of volcanic rock has been directly linked in peer-reviewed research to increased hydrothermal circulation and heightened instability at volcanoes in Iceland and Alaska. In the Andes, the process has a name: glacial unloading. And at a volcano whose primary danger comes from ice-saturated, acid-weakened rock on steep slopes, removing the ice that was holding everything together is not a reassuring trend. This is documented, peer-reviewed, applicable directly to Mount Rainier. And the mountain just had its largest earthquake swarm in recorded history from within the exact zone that glacial unloading is known to destabilize. Those two facts exist at the same time, in the same mountain, above the same valley, full of the same people. Here is where things stand as of today. The swarm is officially over. Alert level is green. The USGS says there's no cause for concern. Every one of those statements is accurate. And every one of those statements exists alongside the following facts. The Sunset Amphitheater on the upper west flank contains intensely altered, collapse-prone rock confirmed by aerogeophysical surveys published in Nature. The hydrothermal process that caused 1,350 earthquakes is continuing below the detection threshold. The lahar warning system has not received significant federal investment since 2001. King County has no zoning restrictions for volcanic hazard. Over 90,000 people live in the mapped hazard zone. The USGS officially estimates a 1 in 7 chance of a catastrophic lahar in the next 75 years.